Hey y'all, welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting in Yoga Pants. So we're jumping right back in to our discussion around internal mobility. We talked about this last week and I shared with you really kind of the definition of it, what it all means. We had some good discussion around it. And this week I want to finish up this topic by sharing with you a cautionary tale. So I promised you a story. I hope I can recall the details in enough detail to give you the goods, but without telling on anyone. So we'll see. I also have an example of this done right. And I think it's important to balance the bad with the good, because I actually have worked with teams who got it and who really thoughtfully considered all the angles, the right way to balance the internal movement, the internal growth, and the external hiring. So as we have discussed in a previous video, internal mobility is not always upwards. Sometimes it is a lateral transfer. Promotions rarely actually take a head count. You're just moving up the ladder yourself. You're not necessarily taking a new role. So a lot of the hiring discussions that people try to drag this whole idea around promotions into are two separate topics. They're actually not connected, believe it or not. So hopefully that's clear now after the last few videos and this video. But of course, if there are questions around that, drop a comment down below. I will gladly address it either in the comments or maybe in a future video if needed. Alrighty, cautionary tale time. Once upon a time, I worked for a very large company. This is a few companies ago. I'm not going to name any names here, okay? I'm not going to tell any tales. This has been some time though. And was working with a leader who, said all the right things, right? Like, yeah, I'll look at resumes. They weren't totally bought into it. I could tell. This is a new partnership for me. And I could tell they weren't really like, yeah, I don't see Amy as a trusted advisor. That was not the vibe. But, we did agree, like, hey, you want this published internally and externally? Cool, we can do that. Had that conversation last week. We can, this is the process. This is how my team will engage with you. Okay, fine. And internal movement, as in lots of companies, is driven by the hiring manager. So I would be informed. I could obviously have access to, once a formal application was started, things like that, because I had to do some kind of back-end processing stuff as well. But I didn't always know the conversations that were happening. I was not part of informational discussions or off-the-record interviews, also not uncommon, right, in this kind of hiring. So some months in, I'm noticing a trend. I'm noticing that our pass-through rates for this particular group, part of a much larger business group that I was working with, were dismal. And that's one of the reasons I track data like this, and I am so picky about reporting, is because I want to know, where are there trends? Where are there like weird outliers? Are we doing something really right? Are we doing something really wrong? All of those inputs and data points really tell a story. And the story that I was being told through this data is that this particular manager was over-indexing hard on internal transfers. And I said, I had a meeting with this leader and I said, hey, I'm just noticing this trend. I have sent you some really great profiles you've not been interested in. We've made several hires over these, however many months. They're all internal, but they're all coming from a specific division. And not only are they all coming from a specific division, they're coming from a specific country. So we were transferring people from this other country to the US on an internal L1 visa. So this is an intercompany way to sponsor. Now, I want to be really clear. I'm not trying to keep anyone out of their dream job, out of, changing, countries, change. Like, I support that. I think the L1 is a great option. But again, too much of a good thing? Like, what is the impact to the rest of the team, to the division that's losing people left and right? There's more to the story here that I'm not quite getting, right? And so I'm having this conversation with the manager, and, he's just kind of shooing me off and like, no, these are the people I want. They're the best people for this job, blah, blah, blah. I'm not so sure, but okay. We start getting a little side eye from HR and legal because we're processing lots of these intercompany L1 visas. And so the question comes back to me, like, hey, Amy, what's going on? Are you not able to find qualified people locally? Are you not able to find people who don't need relocation, who don't need, brand new sponsorship? Like, it's a whole thing. This is why I track everything, y'all. Because when those questions came, I was able to say, hey, here's the history. Here are the people that I have been, recruiting and presenting for these roles that have been rejected. Here's the conversations that I've been having with this leader. Documentation is everything. I've got emails. I've got, all the things. Again, not my job to tell people how they should or should not hire, but it is my job to consult, to influence where I can, and to certainly make folks aware. So again, without getting into too much detail, what was uncovered through some ongoing discussions was that this is a leader who had previously run that division in this other country some years prior, had himself moved to the US, working for an exec who had also come from the same country, and was rebuilding his team to look exactly like it looked like a few years prior. Fun fact, the exec came from the same place, shared nationality, put an absolute stop to it instantly, and shared with both the leader and myself. We hire the people who fit the role best and who can do the job, and we also keep in mind the impact that diversity can have on our team. And it was a really interesting moment because I didn't know how that was going to go. I mean, these folks shared this connection, this cultural connection, this previous, shared homeland, shared work experience. They both worked in the same division. I mean, there was a long-standing partnership and working relationship here, in addition to just the cultural connections. And this exec was like, absolutely not. It's yes, you had great people there, and yes, we're not saying that they're not qualified engineers, but you have literally, like, we had to pull resumes, we had to do all this deep dive work, literally passing over stronger candidates in favor of someone you know. For what it's worth, this particular ethnicity is not considered a minority in tech. I'm just going to leave it at that. I know that only leaves a couple of options, but I'm just going to leave it there. And, it was just a really interesting moment, and I'm so glad that our exec was able to drive that conversation, and the leadership was actually able to come in and say, this doesn't work, and here's all the whys. So we were able to kind of reset our recruiting going forward. If I remember correctly, I think that this person actually lost the remaining headcount that they had. They were kind of grounded from hiring for a little bit, and we ended up moving some headcount to a different team, and we're able to continue really focusing on, again, not just the right people, but keeping in mind diversity, female representation, things like that. It was really, really important to this leader, which I will forever be grateful. He was a great, great, great recruiting partner. So, alrighty, so that's internal mobility gone a little sideways. Let's talk about a really great model. So I worked with or have worked with what can probably be best described as a startup within a large organization. Never done this kind of work before, building something that had never been built before in this organization. And so we had no choice but to go outside. I mean, this talent just literally did not exist in the organization. So of course it made sense, like, we're going to have to bring in some external folks. We're eventually going to be able to open this up to internals and training opportunities and entry-level roles. But for now, here's what we're building. Great. But we balanced that short-term need with a long-term view. So the short term, we know we have to go outside. We know it's going to have to look like this in the interim. Long term, this is what we envision. This is what we would like to build. And we did exactly that. So what did we want to build? We wanted to bring in that initial senior bench strength, right? We needed to bring in people who had that particular expertise, who came from the industry we were getting into, things like that. And we set an intention that our first X number of hires are going to come from this external pool. And then we're going to start building our lower level, kind of adding junior folks, entry-level folks, mid-level folks, things like that. And once we built what we could consider a stable team, and there was some training built around that, and there was just a lot of, extra work, not just hiring, but also creating processes, creating training department, creating lots of cool stuff to help support this. Now the team is at a place after all of this work to where they're no longer looking for senior folks or leadership. The intention is, and they've built this into the headcount plan, that we are growing those leaders from within. So whenever a lead role opens up, we are absolutely already having those conversations with our current staff to understand who wants growth. What does that look like for them? What do they need to do to be ready for that? And so having these conversations over weeks and months have enabled us that when the time comes, okay, now I need that new lead. Now the team is big enough to spread it out into 2 teams, what have you. I've already got people on the bench that I'm moving up. And so a lot of the hiring that Amy and her team gets to do is now backfilling the people that we're promoting. Now, we absolutely have reserved the right that if we get to a point where we don't have anybody interested, maybe people we've earmarked for this, aren't hitting the mark, maybe there's some other reason that we can't consider internal transfers or, again, promotions, which is the ideal space, we can go outside if we need to. But our intention in building this program, and this is why I'm so grateful for the leaders who've partnered with me on this and who really have made this their goal, we've created this mechanism for people to truly grow. And so for us to back up when my team and I go out there and say, hey, look, this is a great opportunity for these reasons, and you're going to have this kind of growth if you want it, we're backing it up. It's happening in real life. So I'm super proud of that, but it comes with a lot of intentionality. It comes with a lot of planning, and it starts in the early phases of, hey, I'm building this team. What does my long-term vision look like? And how do I make sure I'm thinking of all of the different ways to recruit to make sure I have the right balance? Really proud of that work, y'all. I need to make sure it's on my resume. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome again to the new office. We'll see how long I can keep it clean. And as always, appreciate all the comments, appreciate all the feedback, and any other topic ideas, you know where to leave them. Read them all. We will see you next week.